Hello, my fellow witches, occultists, alchemists, etc. I am doing a continuation of my review of the Witchfinder General, Matthew Hopkins, The Discovery of Witches. Now, I am going to be using certain things from the book which I didn't get to, but this time I'm also going to discuss a representation of Witchfinder General throughout different shows, movies, other books that could be related. Anyway, so we are going to start with, well, I guess we could start with the book. I am gonna go over a part of the book which describes certain demons that Matthew Hopkins sort of talked to a witch about, which from my work as a witch with spirit work and other stuff, I believe it could partially be true, but most likely is a lie. A big, fat lie. Nonetheless, I will discuss it. Anyway, so, it says, there's a question. I pray, where was this experience gained, and why gained by him and not by others? I think that is a very, very smart question. The answer is the discoverer never traveled far for it, but in March 1644, he had some 7 or 8 of that horrible sect of witches living in the town where he lived. A town in Essex called Manningtree, with divers other adjacent witches of other towns who every 6 weeks in the night, being always on the Friday night, had their meeting close by this house, and had their several solemn sacrifices there offered to the devil, one of which this discoverer heard speaking to her imps one night, and bid them go to another witch, who was thereupon apprehended, and searched by a woman who had for many years known the devil's marks, and found to have 3 teats about her, which honest a woman have not. So upon command from justice, they were to keep her from sleep 2 or 3 nights, expecting in that time to see her familiars, which the 4th night she called in by their several names, and told them what shapes a quarter of an hour before they came in, there being 10 of us in the room. Okay. This one, it was apparently told by a local in the town. That could very well be bullshit. What I mean is, they most likely were under religious rule and had an idea, but is most likely false. There is also obvious blatant sexism But anyway, now moving on to the quote-unquote imps or familiars. The first she called was Halt, who came in like a white kitling. Second, Jarmara, who came in like a fat spaniel without any legs at all. She said she kept him fat, for she clapped her hand on her belly and said he sucked good blood from her body. Yeah, that seems very questionable, honestly. I find this name funny, but number 3, Vinegar Tom, who was like a long-legged greyhound, with a head like an ox, with a long tail and broad eyes, who when this discoverer spoke to and bade him go to the place provided for him and his angels, immediately transformed himself into the shape of a child of 4 years old without a head, and gave 6 turns about the house, and vanished at the door. First of all, the name Vinegar Tom is funny to me. I'm sorry if that seems childish. But this description of Vinegar Tom, it seems very Solomonic traditional demonology. Anyway, number 4, Sack and Sugar, like a black rabbit. Sack and Sugar. Vinegar Tom and Sack and Sugar are so far weird-ass names, but interesting in their own way, I guess. Number 5, News, like a polecat. All of these vanished away in little time. Immediately after this witch confessed several other witches from who she had her imps, and named to divers women where their marks were the number of their marks, and imps names, as Elemanzer Pyewacket, Peckin the Crown, Grizzle, Greedy Gut, etc. So, yeah, more imps which have weird-ass names. Anyway, which no mortal could invent, and upon their searches the same marks were found, the same number, and in the same place, and like confessions from them of the same imps, though they knew not that we were told before, and so preached one another's thereabouts, that joined together in like the damnable practice that in our 100 in Essex 29 were condemned at once, 4 brought 25 miles to be hanged, where this discoverer lives, for sending the devil like a bear to kill him in his garden. So by seeing diverse of the men's paps, and trying ways with hundreds of them, he gained this experience, and for aught he knows, any man else may find them, as well as he and his company, if they had the same skill and experience. Now, we are going to discuss the Witchfinder through representation. Now, there is a film, I believe, directly titled Witchfinder General, and it involves Matthew Hopkins being played by Vincent Price. Now, Vincent Price, I think he's a good actor. I hear about him a lot in pop culture and stuff, but I have never seen the film, and according to many sources, it's apparently not the best representation. An interesting representation would be from the Disney show, The Owl House, which takes place in hell or the witch realm. In reality, it's more of a commentary on Puritanism. One common theme throughout the show is religious trauma, and I think that's great. It should be talked about. But the villain is very much an insert of Matthew Hopkins, named Philip Wittebane, or Emperor Belos. And he wants to earn the title Witchfinder General. I recommend you watch the show. It's very interesting. I'm surprised I'm commenting on a Disney show, but it's apparent it's good representation as far as I've seen. A interesting character on there, which is hinted as being a descendant of sorts to Matthew Hopkins, is a guy named James Hopkins. He is also obsessed with witches and is trying to become, well, in his mind, he is a witchfinder. And I think it's quite funny because he states that it's actually making fun of conspiracy theorists. He says, witches and demons are real, which, as an occultist, I agree. But he then follows up with, and they're all coming from Mars to harvest human teeth to power their time machine. Now, it's obviously a gag, a joke, but I think it's quite an interesting take. It really puts into perspective how kind of stupid a lot of these historical accusations for witches are. They would really just find random people or people they just hated, and they could really just say they're a witch and they'd get killed. Like, you hate this person, accuse them of being a witch, they're out of your way. It's redundant, but good commentary nonetheless, for as truthfully dark as it is. Now, we are going to discuss the Witchfinder through representation. Now, there is a film, I believe, directly titled Witchfinder General, and it involves Matthew Hopkins being played by Vincent Price. Now, Vincent Price, I think he's a good actor. I hear about him a lot in pop culture and stuff, but I have never seen the film, and according to many sources, it's apparently not the best representation. An interesting representation would be from the Disney show, The Owl House, which takes place in hell or the witch realm. In reality, it's more of a commentary on Puritanism. One common theme throughout the show is religious trauma, and I think that's great. It should be talked about. But the villain is very much an insert of Matthew Hopkins, named Philip Wittebane, or Emperor Belos. And he wants to earn the title Witchfinder General. I recommend you watch the show. It's very interesting. I'm surprised I'm commenting on a Disney show, but it's apparent it's good representation as far as I've seen. A interesting character on there, which is hinted as being a descendant of sorts to Matthew Hopkins, is a guy named James Hopkins. He is also obsessed with witches and is trying to become, well, in his mind, he is a witchfinder. And I think it's quite funny because he states that it's actually making fun of conspiracy theorists. He says, witches and demons are real, which, as an occultist, I agree. But he then follows up with, and they're all coming from Mars to harvest human teeth to power their time machine. Now, it's obviously a gag, a joke, but I think it's quite an interesting take. It really puts into perspective how kind of stupid a lot of these historical accusations for witches are. They would really just find random people or people they just hated, and they could really just say they're a witch and they'd get killed. Like, you hate this person, accuse them of being a witch, they're out of your way. It's redundant, but good commentary nonetheless, for as truthfully dark as it is. There is a book called Maleficarum, or the Witch Hammer. It was sort of the witch hunter's Bible, and was used to pretty much justify witch trials, and was used as a sort of source in many witch trials. It's hard to read. Like, you could read it, but in some cases it's hard just to get through 2 to 3 sentences of the book. And it's basically this idiot man who, because his wife doesn't want to sleep with him, he blames her of being a witch or manipulated by a witch. Basically, he blames witches for his wife not sleeping with him. It's stupid and hilarious. He really is just a man. Many historians and people who review the book have literally said he is notorious for being obsessed with sex. And the book is literally a man complaining about his penis on every single page. It's hilarious and stupid and annoying, but it kind of inspired many witch trials. It's very interesting history. Unfortunately, I will not be going through that history. I recommend you doing your own research on that history if you want to learn more. Speaking of Malleus Maleficarum, let's talk about the books that Witchfinder General Matthew Hopkins was inspired by. He spoke highly of King James. His Bible was of King James, and what inspired his witch-hunting techniques was King James' book of demonology. Now, I am a demonologist and a witch who works with demons and angels and gods and goddesses and etc. As dull and obviously not exactly well-versed that King James was very much, it's like the corrupt Christian demonology, but it's still honored by demonologists for its history. It was one of the only demonology texts at the time that people had access to. And a lot of people were illiterate at the time, but King James was, well, he was a royal, he was a king, of course he knew it, but this kind of helped future of occultism even today. Nonetheless, he was a man of his time. I hate using man or woman of the time as an excuse, but in this case he grew up and lived in a theocracy of Christianity, so that is partially to blame. So Matthew Hopkins' main source of inspiration was King James' book of demonology and the King James Bible, and he spoke highly of King James. That is just something to keep in mind when learning about Matthew Hopkins. A practice within these witchfinders was witch pricking. Witch pricking involved lancing these marks to see if the accused felt any pain. The practice involved stripping and shaving the victim completely and pushing the pin in repeatedly until the right spot was found. This involved walking a woman to exhaustion before questioning, making the accused stand or sit in a room without food or water and watching them for hours, and the infamous ducking or swimming in a stream or river, where the accused would be bound, tied to men on each bank, and thrown into the water to see whether she sank or floated. Witch prickers were women who searched the bodies of the accused for devil's marks. As hysteria grew, Hopkins spent 1646 conducting his witch hunts, demanding a healthy sum in return. It was reported that Ipswich and Suffolk had to raise taxes to pay for his services. Now, Matthew Hopkins was not the only one there. For example, John Stern. John Stern was an associate of self-styled Witchfinder General Matthew Hopkins, who was active during the English Civil War. The duo's activities were portrayed unreliably in the 1968 cult classic Witchfinder General. Stern was known at various times as the Witch Hunter and Witch Pricker. Another is Roger Nowell. Nowell was a magistrate in Lancashire, a county plagued by both economic hardship and lingering pockets of Roman Catholicism. Nowell heard about a merchant who had allegedly been cursed by an alleged witch named Demdike for not selling her pins, and he subsequently died attempting to earn favor with witch-obsessed King James. Nowell used Janet Device's testimony and convicted 11 people of witchcraft, including Janet's family members. Another is Margaret Aitken, Margaret Aitken, whatever. Aitken is an unusual addition to this list. She was accused of witchcraft. She avoided torture and execution and turned to Witchfinder by claiming to be able to recognize fellow witches. To spare her own life during her confession, she claimed to be able to recognize other witches by looking for special marks in their eyes, and told her interrogators she knew of a convention of 2,300 witches in Athol. Aitken's short-lived success not only led to the execution of hundreds of women, but also led to imitators such as Anne Ewing in the summer of 1597. A skeptical prosecutor took some of those Aitken had declared guilty and brought them back to her next day in different clothing, and when she declared them innocent, she was exposed as a fraud, taken back to the faith, and then burnt by the stake. Another was John Cotta. Although not a witchfinder per se, John Cotta was a doctor and leading expert on witchcraft, despite being known for exposing quack doctors and arguing for better medical learning. Cotta was convinced of the existence of witches, sorcerers, and witchcraft, and his works influenced many of the witchfinders of the 17th century, thanks to his assertion that eyewitness accounts were sufficient to charge a suspected witch with witchcraft. In his book, The Trial of Witchcraft, 1616, he states that witchcraft is beyond human knowledge, and that only by conjecture and inference is it possible to understand it. While he warned readers that many suspected witches were really impostors or unwitting agents of the devil, he took it as read that magic was a factor in day-to-day life, because many diseases displayed symptoms that could not be understood or did not respond to known remedies. Cotta wrote, "Hence, as witches do strange and supernatural works, and truly venturesin worthy of wonder, so the impostor doth things void of accountable reason, in shadow, shew, and seeming only supernatural, wondered and admired, and hence it cometh to pass, that with discerning minds they are sometimes mistaken and confused one for another." Another is Christian Caldwell. Caldwell was a notorious cross-dressing witch-hunter and pricker, active in Morayshire, Scotland, during the 1660s. It was a commonly held belief that a witch would have devil's marks or witch marks about her body where animal familiars sent by the devil would suckle blood before doing their bidding. This, however, was a trade for men, so Caldwell apparently disguised herself as a man to pursue her career. Her first contract was with the Belle of Spain. John Innes, who granted her leave to live in the Shire for 1 year and identify witches for salary of 6 shillings a day. She went on to wrongly accuse a man called John Hay, an influential court messenger who ordered her arrest. Dixon was accused of witchcraft and interrogated in Edinburgh on 30 August 1662 on the basis of false accusations, torture, and causing death of innocent people in Moray. Her true gender was discovered, and she was banished to a plantation in Barbados on 4 May 1663, the day her last victim was burned. Another is John Godbold. It is likely that the impact of Hopkins and Stern's activities extended far across East Anglia, and in 1645 there was reported to be a significant number of alleged witches in Suffolk. Not being put on trial, a routine assize commission was drawn up with Goldbond, an MP and sergeant-at-arms, as its judge. Parliament, alarmed at the number of confessed witches in Suffolk, granted Goldbond special emergency powers, usually deployed against seditious plots and rioters, to try and punish. There have been as many as 150 accused of witchcraft, and a ban had to be used to hold them all. Both Hopkins and Stern testified at several of the trials, but any witchfinder using the swimming test was severely rebuked by Godbold. A first group of 2 men and 16 women were sentenced to death, and after an adjournment caused by the approach of royalist forces, another 50 were subsequently hanged as witches. Another, which I find very interesting, was Sir Henry Chauncey. Chauncey was a Hertfordshire lawyer who, at the age of 80, was involved in one of England's last witch hunts in 1712. The alleged witch, Jane Wenham, brought a charge of defamation against a farmer after they called her a witch. As the local justice of the peace, Chauncey referred the matter to the rector of Waltham, and Wenham was awarded a shilling, though advised to be less quarrelsome. Disappointed with the outcome, it was reported that she had said she would have justice some other way, and supposedly then bewitched Anne Thorne, a servant at the rectory. Chauncey issued a warrant for her arrest and gave instructions that she be searched for witch marks. Although no such marks were found, she was tried at assize court in Hertford, where several neighbors claimed they had witnessed her practicing witchcraft, which asked to repeat the Lord's Prayer. She apparently stumbled and subsequently confessed. She was convicted, but judge set aside her conviction, suspended the death penalty, and sought a royal pardon from Queen Anne. Wenham escaped the hangman's noose, but was removed from her village for her own safety.